My dad kept a secret, baby. Now he says I owe him free babysitting for respect. Please excuse any typos. I am crying while typing this, and the screen is a blur of light and salt. I'm 27 years old, a grown woman with a job and a life, yet here I am, hiding from my own father like a teenager who broke curfew. Except I didn't break a rule. I just said no for the first time in my life. To understand why I'm currently hyperventilating in a parking lot, you have to understand the last 11 years. My parents separated when I was 16. In my country, divorce isn't legal. It's a permanent state of legal limbo. You're married on paper, but strangers in practice. The split wasn't a conscious uncoupling. It was a scorched earth, glass-shattering war. As kids, we were the collateral damage. My older sister, my brother, and I were left picking up the pieces of a home that just didn't exist anymore. Mom eventually had to leave. It's the hardest thing she ever did, and she sat us down to explain it. She told us she simply couldn't provide the life or the security that our father could at that time. She was starting from zero. No money, no assets, just her will to survive. My father? He had the house. He had the stability. He also had the microphone. Both of my parents raised us on a very strict interpretation of honor thy father and mother. It's a biblical commandment that was drilled into our heads from the moment we could speak. Respect was the currency of our household. But after Mom left, Dad used that respect as a weapon. For a year, we lived in a house where her name was synonymous with traitor. Every dinner was a lecture on her abandonment. Every weekend was a reminder of how much better off we were without her instability. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I believed him. I spent a year resenting her. I said things to her on the phone that still make my stomach turn today. As an adult, I've spent the last 6 years painstakingly repairing that bond. I realized that Mom didn't leave us. She escaped him. I carry a deep, heavy regret for those years of coldness toward her. It's a debt I feel like I can never fully repay. While Mom eventually found a supportive partner, a man who treats us with quiet, genuine kindness without ever trying to replace anyone, Dad's romantic life has been a revolving door of chaos. His exes were always problematic, but because of the honor thy father rule, we were his supporting cast. We were the ones who had to drive his girlfriends around. We were the ones who had to smile and make small talk with their families. We were the ones expected to impress them so Dad would look like a successful, beloved patriarch. Then came Pan. She's been around for over 5 years now. Pan is complicated. She has a huge family that my father is obsessed with. For the last 5 years, I've had to sit through countless dinners where Dad compares us to Pan's relatives. Look at how generous they are, he'll say, gesturing to a gift Pan's sister bought him. Look at their Christmas traditions. They're so close-knit. That's what a real family looks like. He says this as if we didn't have our own traditions before he blew them up. He acts like my older sister didn't essentially raise me and my brother while he was out finding himself with new women. My sister, the strongest person I know, always told us to just keep our heads down. Just survive, she'd whisper. Don't give him a reason to start a fight. It's not worth the peace. Last year, the dynamic shifted from annoying to toxic. Pan got pregnant. My father didn't tell me. He didn't tell my sister. He hid it for months. My brother was the first to find out, and he was livid. He pressured Dad to come clean, but Dad refused. He told my brother he was scared that I would get hysterical and run to tell my mom. Think about that for a second. His biggest fear wasn't that he'd hurt us, or that he was living a double life. It was that I'd tell the woman he is still technically married to. The irony is that my brother was the one who eventually threatened to tell Mom after a separate argument they had. Dad was so paranoid about me, the emotional daughter, when it was the son he was coddling who held the leverage. When he finally sat me down to confess, I didn't scream. I didn't throw a fit. In fact, I did the opposite. I saw him sitting there, a grown man looking small and pathetic, and I hugged him. He actually cried in my arms. I told him, Dad, if you're confident in how you've lived and how you raised us, you don't have to be scared of me hating you. I said that because I had already learned my lesson with Mom. I wasn't going to be the judge and jury of his personal life. My brother, however, pulled me aside later and told me to stop being so soft. They're adults, he said. They knew exactly what they were doing. Don't feel bad for a man who chose this. The baby was born, and the secret became a reality. Since December 2025, the pressure has been mounting. A few weeks ago, I was at a gathering with Pan's family. They are loud, boisterous, and they treat me like a built-in babysitter. One of Pan's sisters nudged me and said, "So, when are you taking the baby for a weekend? Pan needs a break, and you're the big sister. It's your duty." I just forced a laugh and looked at my plate. I felt like a prop. When I told my brother-in-law, my older sister's husband, about it, he got very serious. He's always been a straight shooter. He looked at me and said, "Do not get entangled in that. I don't care if your dad offers you money. I don't care if he offers to pay for a vacation. The moment you start taking care of that child, you are choosing a side. It will sour your relationship with your mother all over again. You've worked too hard to get her back." My other relatives, the ones who know the truth, were even more blunt. One aunt asked me, "Do you have any pride left? You're keeping his secret fine. But now you're going to be the nanny for the woman who moved into your mother's space? Have some self-respect." It felt like a weight was being dropped on my chest. Dad kept telling me that obeying him and helping with the baby was the ultimate way to honor him. He was literally using a commandment to guilt-trip me into childcare. Tonight was supposed to be my night off. I had plans with my friends, something I've been looking forward to for weeks. I was actually getting ready, putting on makeup, feeling like a normal 27-year-old, when my phone rang. It was Dad. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask what I was doing. He just said, "I need you to come over. Cancel whatever you're doing and get here by 7 p.m. Pan and I have a dinner with her family, and the sitter canceled. You need to watch the baby." My heart dropped. I tried to stay calm. "Dad, I can't. I have plans tonight, and honestly, I've told you before, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not comfortable being the one to take care of the baby." The silence on the other end was cold. Then the explosion. "Comfortable," he hissed. "You're talking about comfort when your family needs you? This isn't the time for you to be jealous. We planned this weeks ago. You planned it without asking me, Dad." I finally raised my voice, my hand trembling as I held the phone. "I'm not jealous. I'm tired. I'm tired of being the person who has to fix your life. I'm 27. I am not a backup parent for a child that isn't mine." He started yelling. He told me that as a family, we have to make sacrifices. He said I was being selfish, that I was setting aside my feelings at the expense of his happiness. He told me I was failing to honor him. That was it. I broke. I started sobbing, not the pretty cinematic kind, but the ugly, gasping kind. I told him he was unfair. I told him he spent 10 years telling me Mom was the problem, only to turn around and demand I serve the woman who replaced her. My older sister was at my house when this happened. She saw me crumpled on the floor, phone to my ear, shaking. She didn't even ask. She just walked over and snatched the phone out of my hand. I've never heard her speak to him like that. She was cold, precise, and lethal. "She isn't coming, Dad," she said. Her voice didn't shake once. "And if you call her one more time tonight to scream at her, I'm going to make sure every single person in this family knows exactly why you're so desperate for a sitter. Let Pan worry over her own children. Stop using your daughter as a shield for your mistakes." She hung up and blocked his number on my phone for the night. I couldn't stay in the house. The walls felt like they were closing in. I told my sister I needed air, and I've been sitting in this grocery store parking lot for 2 hours. I feel like a hollow shell. I keep thinking about that commandment. Honor thy father. Does honoring him mean letting him walk all over me? Does it mean being a good daughter at the expense of my own mental health? I feel like if I go and babysit, I am spitting in my mother's face. I am validating every lie he ever told about her. But by saying no, I have dishonored him in his eyes, and the guilt is like a physical weight in my stomach. I'm 27, and I'm hiding in a car because I'm afraid of a phone call. I'm afraid of the text that will come tomorrow. I'm afraid of the family meetings where I'll be labeled the jealous, hysterical daughter who couldn't handle her father having a new life. My sister says I did the right thing. My brother-in-law says I've regained my pride. But why does doing the right thing feel like I'm being torn apart? Am I the asshole? Am I being petty and jealous of a baby? Or am I finally allowed to say that I've sacrificed enough for a man who never once asked what I needed? I'm still crying. I don't think I have any tears left, but they keep coming. I just want to be free of this. I just want to be my own person, not a tool for his new life. Update. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, the conversation replayed in fragments. His voice accusing me of jealousy. The word honor repeating in my head like an alarm I couldn't switch off. Around 3 in the morning, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't crying only because of that one phone call. I was crying because it felt like decades of pressure had finally surfaced at once. The next morning, the messages started. They came through my work phone first because that number wasn't blocked. Short at first, asking why I wasn't answering. Then longer messages about disappointment and sacrifice. By noon, the tone shifted into something colder. He wrote that Pan's family had noticed my absence and that I embarrassed him. He said he had defended me by telling them I was emotional lately, which somehow felt worse than outright anger. It turned me into a problem he had to manage socially. I didn't respond. My hands shook every time a notification appeared, but I kept reminding myself that silence was not disrespect. Silence was distance. My brother called later that day. He had already heard about everything. News travels fast in families like ours because conflict is practically a communication system. He sounded tired rather than surprised. He admitted Dad had called him too, complaining that I was becoming difficult and influenced by my sister. My brother told me something that stuck with me longer than any advice anyone else gave. He said Dad wasn't angry because I refused to babysit. He was angry because I broke a pattern. For years, whenever pressure was applied, one of us eventually gave in to restore peace. This time I didn't. That idea sat heavily with me. I had always believed conflict happened because I failed to smooth things over quickly enough. It never occurred to me that peace in our family often meant surrender. Work became strangely comforting that week. Emails, deadlines, meetings, all predictable things that didn't involve emotional landmines. Still, I found myself jumping whenever my phone buzzed. My coworkers noticed I was quieter than usual, but I blamed it on lack of sleep. Explaining the real reason felt impossible without unraveling years of complicated history. 3 days after the argument, Dad showed up at my apartment unannounced. I wasn't home yet. My sister was. She later told me he knocked repeatedly, not aggressively but persistently, like he expected persistence alone to fix everything. When she opened the door, he immediately asked where I was and whether I was still upset. She didn't let him inside. That alone was a shock to me when she recounted it. Growing up, none of us would have dared deny him entry. Authority in our household was absolute. But she stood there calmly and told him I needed space and that showing up without warning wasn't helping. He apparently tried to frame the situation as a misunderstanding. He claimed he never meant to pressure me and that I was overreacting because of unresolved feelings about Mom. Hearing that secondhand made something inside me shift from hurt into clarity. The narrative was already being rewritten. When I came home later and learned he had been there, my first reaction wasn't fear. It was exhaustion. The situation felt like a cycle restarting itself. Confrontation, denial, emotional guilt, then expectation that normal behavior would resume. That night, I finally talked to Mom about everything. I had avoided telling her because I didn't want to drag her back into old wounds. But keeping it inside felt dishonest. We spoke on the phone for nearly 2 hours. I expected anger or sadness. Instead, she sounded calm in a way that surprised me. She told me something she had learned after leaving the marriage. Honoring a parent does not mean abandoning yourself. Respect and obedience are not the same thing, especially when one person uses authority to erase another person's boundaries. She didn't criticize Dad directly. She didn't ask for details about Pan or the baby. She focused entirely on me. Whether I felt safe, whether I felt pressured, whether I understood that saying no didn't make me cruel. For the first time since the argument, I didn't feel like I was betraying someone by existing in the middle. The following weekend brought another escalation. Extended relatives began contacting me. Some were subtle, asking if everything was okay. Others were less gentle, repeating Dad's version of events. Apparently, he had told several people that I refused to help because I couldn't accept his new family. That hurt more than I expected. Not because strangers misunderstood, but because it echoed the same narrative used years ago against Mom. The realization made my stomach twist. I had watched this pattern before, just from the other side. Instead of defending myself to everyone individually, I chose not to engage. My sister helped reinforce that decision. She reminded me that explanations given under pressure rarely change minds. They just invite more arguments. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened at home with Dad's new household. My brother later told me that babysitting arrangements kept falling through. Pan's relatives who had joked about me stepping in weren't as available as they implied. Dad had to cancel plans twice because childcare wasn't secured. For the first time, the responsibility landed where it actually belonged. A week after everything exploded, Dad finally called again. Calmer this time. I answered because avoiding him forever wasn't realistic. The conversation was awkward, full of pauses. He spoke carefully, like someone testing unstable ground. He admitted things had been stressful since the baby arrived. He said he felt overwhelmed and didn't know how to balance expectations from Pan's family and his existing children. Hearing vulnerability instead of accusation caught me off guard. But then he added that families help each other no matter what, and I felt the old pressure creeping back in. Instead of arguing, I told him something simple. I cared about him, but childcare was not my responsibility. I explained that I needed our relationship to exist outside of obligations. I wasn't refusing out of jealousy or resentment. I was protecting my own emotional limits. The conversation didn't end with agreement. It ended with uneasy acceptance. He didn't apologize, but he didn't yell either. After hanging up, I noticed my hands weren't shaking anymore. The weeks that followed felt strange. Communication between us became minimal and polite. No sudden demands. No emotional speeches. Just occasional check-ins about neutral topics. It wasn't warm, but it also wasn't volatile. My anxiety slowly started easing. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. I started making plans again, without fear they would be overridden by someone else's expectations. One evening, my sister and I talked about how different things felt. She pointed out that nothing catastrophic had happened despite my fear that saying no would destroy the family. The world didn't collapse. Relationships didn't vanish overnight. The biggest change was internal. I no longer felt permanently responsible for maintaining everyone else's comfort. That realization came with grief, too. Accepting boundaries meant accepting that my father might never fully understand them. The image of the obedient daughter he relied on no longer existed in the same way. About a month later, I saw him in person at a small family gathering. The interaction was polite but cautious. He introduced the baby to relatives proudly. When he handed the child to others, he didn't look at me expectantly. That small absence of pressure felt louder than any apology. I greeted the baby briefly, kindly, and then stepped back. No guilt followed. Just neutrality. Driving home afterward, I realized I wasn't hiding anymore. Not physically and not emotionally. The fear that had sent me crying into a parking lot had loosened its grip. The situation isn't magically resolved. There are still awkward moments. Some relatives still view me as stubborn. Dad and I are still learning how to interact without the old hierarchy controlling everything. But something fundamental changed. For the first time in my life, my relationship with him isn't built entirely on compliance. I used to believe adulthood meant continuing to carry the same roles assigned in childhood. Now I'm learning that growing up sometimes means stepping out of those roles, even when it disappoints people you love. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update for more such stories.